Hey everybody, it's me, Root Beer, and I'm continuing talking about lyrical reveals because I'm the only one on the podcast that cares. So, this week we have a new version of Hazoret, and if you remember from back in 2022, Hazoret was one of my favorite decks from that time, so I'm excited to see what this new version has to offer. So, Phosphorescent Stream Hazoret, it has a dress up ability where it's considered the old one. It has an act ability once per turn, Energy Blast 3. Choose up to 5 of your normal unit rear guards, and they get, at the end of the battle that this unit attack, draw a card, put this unit on bottom of the deck, and power plus 2000. And then it has an auto ability on Vanguard Circle. At the start of your battle phase, you Soul Blast 1, and until end of turn, all of your units that are either Hazoret or have less power than standard. There's not really an elegant way for them to write that on the card. They can attack from the back row center column and get power plus 5000. So, this is pretty much a strict upgrade over the original one. So, it now costs Energy Blast instead of a Counter Blast, which kind of shifts around what resources you're using. A major key difference between the new Hazoret and the old one is that you no longer have to attack a vanguard if the translation is correct. That means if you're dealing with like damage triggers or the like, you now have a little bit more flexibility to attack the rear guard and still get the draw. You no longer get the power plus 10,000 that the original had. However, that is offset by the second ability, which gives power plus 5,000 to all of your lower powered units. And then you also have an attack from the back row center built into it, whereas with the original Hazoret, it didn't have a way to enable additional attacks, so you had to rely on your rear guards, mainly Phelan, this grade 1, where you would Soul Blast 1 and choose the back row center rear guard, move it to an open front row. That utility is now fulfilled by Hazoret herself, which means you now have more space in the deck to kind of play with other units. As far as other additional attacks goes, you always had this option from set 4, Rabiria, where it's when it's put from the rear guard circle into your deck, you can Soul Blast 2, move a back row unit to an open front row, and it gets plus 10,000. So this was like always an additional option for another attack. That's something you can still do with the new Hazoret. The only thing is that it is Soul Blast 2, and you're already Soul Blasting 1 for Hazoret herself, so it is a lot of soul to go around. So, in addition to the new Hazoret, we have two new support cards. The first one is Rampant Planetaria Rafesca. So when this unit attacks, if you have a Grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Hazoret, it gets power plus 5,000, and then at the end of battle, you can Soul Blast 1. Jesus Christ, they are putting so many Soul Blasts onto this, and return it to your hand. So funny interaction with Hazoret. Neither of them have returning the unit to the bottom of your deck as a cost, which means if you were to bounce it back to the hand and then resolve the Hazoret effect, like you still get the draw and you get to keep your unit, so you don't have to deal with kind of the RNG of putting a unit back and then hoping you get an equally useful unit at the same time. Though, like I said, does cost you soul, and then there's also still the consideration for Yuika in the deck, like originally you would kind of cheese Hazoret's requirement with Yuika, although now with the addition of Franquette in DZ set 2, you do have another generic bounce option. And you could also potentially use like the cycle card from set 1 to like Energy Blast 3, and then you can choose something to bounce back. Although that one needs to be like at the end of the turn, so that one doesn't really have the synergy there. So it really is just kind of like Yuika or Franquette, or now this. This, like, might replace Yuika, although the advantage of Yuika is that early game that you have with it. And oftentimes your front row units are more useful than just this, which is just like a 13k. With Hazoret, it becomes like 18 with the total power gains you can get, which is okay, but not amazing. I guess like if you were to put it in the front row, it is 28. Could become 38 if you use it with like Rabiria. But, this is seem I'm sorry. This seems like a perfectly like fine card. It might replace the slot in Shaylin. I still have to think about like how Hazoret would be built out. And then the other piece of support, Summer Sky Trail Xenon. So when it's placed on Rearguard Circle from your hand, if you have a Vanguard with Hazoret in its name, choose a critical trigger from your drop zone. You can put it into the bottom of your deck. Already very good, just recycling triggers. Then act once per turn. If you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Hazoret, you can counterblast one, search for one grade 2 or less with like power that's less than standard, so 9k or less, or a grade 1 with 7k or less, call it to Rearguard Circle, and this unit gets power plus 5000. This card is insane. This is basically a custom card. You know, Hazoret's whole thing is playing units with like lower standard power, and this just searches for any of them. You can search for Riberia to like get an extra attack. You can search for like a grade 1 unit like this one so that you can kind of get that like draw and bounce utility. And then, of course, if you're choosing to play like Yuika or Franquette alongside this, you can bounce this back to your hand and just keep like cycling back your critical triggers. And then you can also just shuffle immediately with this effect so that that critical is not just stuck at the bottom of your deck, it's kind of in circulation. This card is insane. It's basically a custom card. So, yeah, like, that's it for this video. Hazoret is good, like, I really like this new one. The only real downside is that you're basically disincentivized from using the old one, like, you can't really search it, it doesn't have a lot of synergy. It would only be played just to get, like, that back row attack, but you already have so many other better units that pretty much don't need the brick of the old one, and of course, because the additional attack is now tied to Hazoret instead of playing Shaylin, like, that's taking away some of the utility that you would have from playing the old one, so that's probably the only downside to this, is, like, it feels like the back row attack and the extra power going to your Hazoret units is a way of, like, you know, if you wanted to play the old one, you can, but there's really no reason to. This is just, like, a strict upgrade, and I do think, like, the surrounding support cards they gave it are very strong. I guess the other, like, main downside in comparison to the old one is that the additional 5k power only goes to things with, like, lower standard power, so it does kinda cut off some of your flexibility in deck building, but you can still just play those units for their utility, right? Like, at the end of the day, the main gimmick of returning things to your deck is still fully generic, so I really like this card, I want to experiment with it more, and, you know, hopefully it has potential the same way I thought Hazoret had potential at the end of 22. We'll see. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.